Football Friday brought to you by Elite Lawns. No mud, no mowing, no mess.
Good evening and welcome to Football Friday here at Bay TV, our weekly look at football locally and nationally. As ever, I'm joined by two erudite former professionals. Changing lineup this week, super sub for a super sub. Graeme Sharp's here, of course, representing the blue half. And welcome to Gary Gillespie, mainstay of Liverpool's defence during the mid-80s. How are you, Gary?
Very well, thank you. Lovely to be here.
What are you up to these days?
Do mainly work for Liverpool's own TV company, bits and bobs for other media outlets, and generally just go and watch Liverpool. Struggled in the last couple of weeks, but certainly the last season was a little bit special, and expectation level was quite high this season.
Too high, probably.
Probably too high this season, and we just haven't really lived up to it.
It's interesting to get a different perspective on Liverpool. As I say, we've had David Fairclough here for weeks who gives us his view of it. People have different perspectives. It seems to me that although Liverpool have not had a great season and they've had a recent dip in form, it seems that Brendan Rodgers is always one game or one result away from mass criticism. That had they lost, for example, at Ewood Park in midweek in the Cup, there would have been people on the phone-ins demanding that he quit or was sacked. And he seems bizarrely to be almost on a knife edge.
I think that's pressure at managing at the highest level, and I think expectation level is always great at like the top 4 or top 6 clubs, especially Liverpool Football Club. You look at the history and tradition that we have. Anytime you become a manager of that football club, expectation level is enormous. You want to win trophies, you want to be certainly in Champions League, and especially after what happened last year. I think everybody just thought it'd be a natural progression that we would be on a regular basis challenging for Champions League. And I think when you start the season the way we did, we didn't start it well. No Suarez, you've lost 30 odd goals there. Daniel Sturridge, I think, played first 2 games and then he was out, for months on end. So you've lost 50 odd goals from where that's basically where we based ourselves on, was our goals and the amount of goals that we could score. We didn't do that this year. We've not done that this year. And when you play catch up, you're always one game away from getting the sort of stick that a manager is going to get, and the team get it as well. They went on a fantastic run. Let's face it. Before the Man United game, Liverpool were undefeated in 2015. I think the only other team were Arsenal. I think as well had the same record. Then you lose to Arsenal. It's no great, shakes losing to Manchester United and Arsenal. They're 2 good sides, but when they're your biggest rivals, you can't afford to lose to your biggest rivals.
That's the point I'm making, though. It's almost as if people are waiting for a chance to go at Rodgers. And I'm not just talking about the media. There are sections of the media who probably think he's not done a great job. But I'm also talking about the fan base, because it takes one bad result, and as I say, these people rush to the phone-ins and immediately start condemning the man.
It's the same situation with Martinez, who had a good season last year and not so good, and people are calling for his head as well. I think expectation level at Liverpool is every year. They went so close last year. The expectation was, can we go one better this year? Hasn't been the case, but Champions League is a big thing for Liverpool. And they needed, they were disappointing this year in Europe, but they need to get back in there. And with the results recently, they just kind of slipped out a little bit. And there's a major doubt now whether they'll get in there. So I think with that comes the pressure.
I think the bottom line, the accepted bottom line for Liverpool this season, the minimum, was 4th or 3rd or 2nd place. They should have won the title last year, I think. So I think the American owners more or less assumed, as Graham's just hinted, that they would make top 4 again. I mean, how damaging will it be to Brendan Rodgers as a manager if they finish outside the top 4 this year?
Well, I think it will be interesting. I think when you look back to, say, under Kenny Dalglish, who took us to the Carling, the Carling Cup final at the time, won that, took us to the Cup final, got beat against Chelsea. Now, fans are looking at that saying, well, that's a trophy, that's reasonably successful, but I think we finished 8th in the Premier League, missed out on Europe by a long way. At no stage of that season we were really even challenging for European football. So I suppose if you look at that and then bring that forward to just now, if Brendan doesn't qualify for the Champions League, which looks highly likely, and doesn't win the FA Cup, Well, I think pressure will be on. I think the questions will be asked. The American owners, they're in it for like success, and they're in it for like.
I mean, it's not a passion play for them.
No, exactly.
It's a business.
No, absolutely. And their business model has been successful in the States with the Boston Red Sox. They've tried to bring that business model over to the UK and obviously into soccer or football, whatever you want to call it. Is it working? It's a difficult thing to put into practice. If you, as a team like Liverpool, and the expectation level that's on Liverpool, and you're not buying the top-rated players, which Liverpool can't really go in. I mean, we're talking about up £150,000 for Raheem Sterling. Liverpool are reluctant to pay £150,000 a week. You look at all the top sides, the Man Cities, the Chelseas, the Man Uniteds, the Arsenals even, they're all paying big money. Wayne Rooney on £200,000, and Costa on more or less the same. So it's a formula that they've got. It still remains to be seen if it will be successful or can be successful.
I would imagine the Americans, being businessmen and not being, they say they're passionate about English football and particularly about Liverpool. I doubt that personally. They see it as a business venture. They will look at the money that's been provided to the manager. And I was looking last night, and in the 34 months that Brendan Rodgers has been there, he spent £211 million on 24 players. He's been averaging spending 1.5 million a week since he arrived. Yeah.
But that's you as a journalist.
A cynical journalist.
A cynical journalist, and probably a little bit of a fan as well. Maybe I'm not saying a fan of Liverpool, but a fan as well. I think what they will be looking at is they'll be looking at the net spend. Yeah. So what he has spent, they'll have a budget on how much they can spend a year. And as long as the manager stays within that budget, which I don't know if he has or he hasn't, but I'm sure like they would soon make noises if he hadn't. So I think they'll be looking at that more than what you're looking at.
The only thing with that, Ian, is like every manager spends money, and it's not guaranteed that every sign is going to be a success. So some of those you'd say, yeah, it's been successful. No, this has been a failure. That happens all the time. Okay, the money comes in. Of course, it comes into it, but I think every manager, makes bad signings. And I think what you mentioned, some of the ones before that haven't really, produced for Liverpool.
I think that's the problem, that he's bought so many players and they haven't been cheap players. The average price he's paid is £9 million for players.
Yeah, but what is the average price of players these days? I mean, I think the one mistake I would say, maybe a mistake, something that you'll probably look back on and maybe regret and rue a little bit, that they didn't go out and buy a really top-class striker at the beginning of the season. I know they got Balotelli. Balotelli was always going to be a risk. It hasn't really quite worked for them. But, you bought two fullbacks in Manquillo and Alberto Moreno. Did you really need two fullbacks? Possibly because you've got Champions League, got a lot more games. But I think you'll look back in it. Sturridge was out. Leading goal scorer at this moment in time, Steven Gerrard with 10 goals, Sterling with 10 goals. That's not enough to be challenging for Champions League. You have to have somebody that's going to be scoring you 20, 25
well, you're right.
goals
I mean,
a season.
if you look at what he bought, Balotelli, Barini and Lambert, and none of them ever play, really. I mean, for different reasons, I suspect.
Lambert was a strange one. He was a good player in the Premier League for Southampton, so you think, take a risk on that. Balotelli was a risk. I think he's a fantastic footballer, but where you get the best out of him. So there were some risky signings, but sometimes you take a chance and he's thinking you're going to turn things around.
I feel desperately sorry for Ricky Lambert in a way. I mean, the man's just pushed his career down a one-way street. He was scoring goals at the top-ish level with Southampton. He was in the England squad. He's come to his dream move to Liverpool,
it's a dream
and it just hasn't worked. But the strange thing is that he can only play one way, really, Ricky Lambert, and Brendan must have known the way he plays, and yet now he's almost saying he doesn't play the way that I want him to.
But Gary was saying about coming in and buying players, and what you've got to realise now that Liverpool came close last year, but they're not, as you say, like a Manchester City who can go out and spend loads of money in the strike. So those players, the top players in the world, will be attracted to Manchester City, Chelsea of this world, and Liverpool are a little bit down the pecking order. So to replace Suarez was always going to be difficult, to get a top league. Costa went to Chelsea. So it's difficult for Liverpool at this moment in time. They're not in a time where they could buy the best players. When Gary was playing, not a problem, and the top players wanted to come to Liverpool. I think that's changed a little bit now with the Manchester Cities, the Chelsea of this world.
I mean, if a player, I don't know. I mean, I don't have the player's mentality. If a player now is looking for a big move to a big club, is that driven by playing Champions League football, or is it driven by the size of the wage packet?
I think they go hand in hand, though, don't they? That's the thing.
You can get both.
If you're a team playing in Champions League, you can afford to pay the big money. I think London's a big draw as well. I think gone are the days where, like, you know, Merseyside was the dominant force, or the North West was the dominant force in certainly English football. I think London is a big draw to people as well. So you add that into the equation, and Chelsea, Arsenal are probably two of the biggest favourites to sign the top players. I mean, now that Arsenal are back in the race, it seems to be that they're more than willing to sign players now, as opposed to before.
Liverpool's problem will be if they don't make the Champions League.
Absolutely,
as you say, they don't pay the huge money that other clubs do, and there'll be Europa League football on offer, but that's not enough these days, is it, to get the big names in that will make a real difference to them?
Listen, Liverpool have still got the name. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is, as Gary says, top players want to play in Champions League. They want to play in Champions. That's what they want to do. And okay, the wages and everything else, but the desire and the hunger is to play in the Champions League, which they think is the best in the world. So that's where they want to play, and I think that's a problem if Liverpool don't get in there, is attracting the right players. I
mean, bearing in mind he's got a large squad, an expensively assembled squad. Are we still looking at a clear out in the summer? Perhaps players who didn't get a chance?
I don't think there'll be a clear out. I think there might be one or two, obviously, departures. But I still think it needs strengthened again, and it'll be interesting again at the beginning of the next season when the window opens, you know, who his targets are and who he's going to bring in.
And it'll be interesting to see what budget he's given by the Americans.
And exactly. I mean,
he may well end up, as Martinez does, you have to sell before you can buy, basically, or we'll give you half back of anything you raise through sales.
But I think he's got players there that he can offload if he wants to offload them. The difficult thing, certainly these days, if players come in long contracts, it's hard to get rid of these players. If they're earning decent money and, you know, like, they don't want to go, then they stay put. Players have got, like, the power so much now than before.
OK, that's the end of the first half. We'll come back very shortly after this break to look back at last week's football and forward to this weekend's football.
Free lawnmower removal with every grass laid, because you'll never have to mow again. Elite Lawns Artificial Grass, landscape partners with Tiger Turf.
Hi and welcome back to Football Friday, and my guests Graeme Sharp and Gary Gillespie. In the first part we touched on problems for Brendan Rodgers, although midweek they got through the FA Cup semi-finals. It's not all doom and gloom, is it?
No, massive result. I think after the two disappointing results against Manchester United and Arsenal, it was a must-win, wasn't it? It was always going to be a tricky tie on a tricky surface, bobbly surface. Blackburn surprised me a little bit because they played more or less the same way as what they did at Anfield. I thought they'd have a little bit more get up and go and get in Liverpool's faces a little bit more. Didn't do that. Allowed, you know, Liverpool to get into the game. A lot of possession Liverpool had. Dominated possession for the first half. Blackburn never really looked any threat whatsoever, and that really gave them the platform to go. And it was a sticky game, but uncomfortable. But they never really looked like they were going to lose it. To be honest, I think
they're right. I mean, like everybody else, full house at Ewood, and it can be a noisy place, Ewood, when it's full. I thought Blackburn would just go for it, storm it, and go for it. And I thought that was especially if you look at Liverpool's back line. I mean, Liverpool, as you will testify, has always been famed for strong back lines, and that was probably one of the weakest. I know through circumstances they lost a couple of players through suspension, but if you look at that back line, it was ready-made to be breached, in my view. And Blackburn didn't really go for it.
No, as Gary said, it was a difficult game, but Blackburn aren't a great championship side. You know, they had little spells where they looked good. They had a couple of chances, Mignolet's made a save, but they've got Jordan Rhodes up front, and Jordan Rhodes is one of these that was a big question mark. You know, a lot of teams are supposedly looking at him and saying he can't play in the top level. He was starved of service. He was one up on his own, so you're probably right. They brought the boy on Gillespie maybe too late. But they didn't threaten Liverpool, really. You know, they should have threatened more. And it's difficult going in and taking Liverpool on, squaring up and going toe-to-toe, because Liverpool punish you. But I just thought they lacked ambition a little bit. And I think they were wanting the game to play out, you know, maybe extra time, penalties, whatever. But certainly not enough ambition shown from Blackburn. But Liverpool, I thought, were comfortable. And as Gary said, on a really difficult pitch, you could see as the ball was coming to the players, you know, they weren't comfortable with it. They're used to playing in bowling greens. So the pitch was a leveller as well.
I think Michael Owen, who was doing the summarising on the live coverage, made the point that if you've got a player like Rudy Gillespie who was carrying a hamstring injury, play him from the start, and then if it goes again at least you've got substitutes there. But the only time they looked like scoring, Blackburn, was when they went 2 up front, when they brought him on late, but it was too late.
They went a little bit more direct. I think even had Gillespie played from the start, I think Boyer would have still stuck to his game plan. I don't think Jordan Rhodes would have started. I think he would only put the one up front. Right. Which that surprised me. That was the decision that really surprised me, because, as I say, on a bobbly pitch, and Liverpool are renowned. They did it at Arsenal, played themselves in all sorts of trouble on a fantastic pitch, which is on a bowling green. If you at the back and you're making passes and it's bobbling in front of you, you've got to play on your first touch. And if you've got people in your face coming from all angles, midfield players closing you down, centre forwards closing you down, it makes it so much more difficult. And that's really what surprised me. Blackburn just sat off, got people behind the ball, asked questions of Liverpool, can you break us down? No, they couldn't, in fairness, but they had a lot of bodies back there. But they didn't look a threat themselves. And in games like that, when it's a kind of one-off situation, Blackburn have got nothing to play for themselves. I think they're sitting mid-table in the Championship, something like 10th or something like that. This was an all-out win game, must-win game for them. I thought just.
But as you say, it was their performance was almost a mirror image of the one they gave at Anfield, and it was the complete opposite of what everybody expected. I think the one chance they had was to really go for Liverpool's throat, try and get down the sides and across the back, because the back line was weakened without Can and Skirtle. But they didn't. I mean, Brendan Rodgers must have been ecstatic at the tactics Blackburn employed. And I think the Blackburn fans will have gone home very disappointed.
Yeah, I think they would have. In fairness to Brendan Rodgers, he changed it again. He went back to a back 4 as opposed to having the back 3. Maybe that was dictated maybe with personnel a little bit. But, he did change it around. He went 4-3-3, which maybe caught Blackburn a little bit unawares. But I do still think Blackburn had that game plan and that mentality that it was, just drop off. When Liverpool get the ball, don't put any pressure on because they can play through you. Well, it's difficult to play through teams when it's a bobbly pitch like that. And that's what I'm saying. If they'd put a little bit more pressure on Liverpool from an early stage of the game, I think they maybe got a little bit more benefit out of it.
I think if we go back to the previous game, Arsenal, you would see there a team that did go for Liverpool and reap the rewards, didn't they?
Well, very much so. I think when you looked at Arsenal, they had a game plan right from the start that put Liverpool under pressure. And Liverpool's back 3 at the time looked very, very shaky. In fact, they gave the ball away on numerous occasions. Arsenal really did press up from the back. And I just think at times that Liverpool, when they come up against that, there's so much in the mindset that they've got to play out from the back. Sometimes you just got to put your foot through it.
I mean, Everton have suffered from the same thing this season.
Yeah, I think it's a modern day trend that everybody talks about possession, but you have to earn the right to play football. When at times, especially at Arsenal, I'm looking at Mertesacker, you've got Raheem Sterling up front. Now, Mertesacker, where he wants Raheem Sterling is in front of him. You don't want him behind him. You don't want him running in behind because he ain't got the legs to run with him. So at times, sometimes you have to stretch the game, make the game long to give you the space to to play in. Everton and Liverpool in the 80s were prime examples of that. I mean, as much as we were renowned for a great football inside, both sides played football. Weren't shy to go long, go in behind, stretch the game, give your midfield players the room and the space to go and play, and your ball players. Then they can make the difference.
I mean, the difference when you were playing, when you arrived at Anfield, in fact, you had arguably the best centre-back pairing in Europe to get it to work your way through to get in the team, Hansen and Lauritsen, and they were always famed for playing football out. But you're right, they didn't all exclusively play it that way, did they? The same as the great Everton team you played.
Not at all. And Gary's right. You can't. You first and foremost, you're there as a defender. You defend. And I think some of the things at Everton as well, when they're trying to play out the back. And Phil Jagielka has been schooled from his early days to play one way and be a defender, an old-fashioned. Now all of a sudden he's been asked to come out with the ball, and you can see at times he doesn't look comfortable. And the number of times boys or John Stones as well, is maybe over-elaborated at times. First and foremost, your job as a defender is to defend. Yes, once you can come out and play in as Gary.
I mean, put it in Rose Ed does still come into football, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Safety first.
I think I look at Barcelona, and Barcelona are probably the most renowned from playing football from the back. But what they do is they get the ball into the opposition's half early, so they keep possession in the opposition's half. If you look at a lot of teams in the Premier League football, the amount of people that have the majority of touches that have are through the centre backs and the goalkeeper. Yeah. So your two centre backs, your full backs, and your goalkeeper probably touch the ball more than your central midfield player. And your central midfield player, from me, or your two central midfield players, are the ones that you should be giving the ball to like distribute up further up the pitch. But as soon as the quicker you can get into the opposition's half, for me, it's far better. It's far better to contain your opposition in their half than them putting pressure on you as a centre back or as a full back or as a defender in your own half. It just adds pressure onto you.
And yet, strangely, the game at the Emirates could have been different had Sterling taken that chance. It would have been a completely different game, I suspect.
Big games are always decided on situations like that. I think, you know, the chances are few and far between. Arsenal didn't really have that many opportunities other than, I think it was a spell 10 minutes before the half-time. But that was the best opportunity of the game. You know, he just got it wrong. And the pass was just a little bit overcooked. He could have shot himself. But if you look at the pass, it was a bad pass. So putting like 2 and 2 together, if he had a shot, he'd probably had a bad shot. So, you know, but like that was a guilty-edged chance. And that goes in, game's different. You know, Liverpool were on top at that time as well. So the game changes. So
it's like, I mean, you said earlier on, thin dividing lines.
Absolutely.
The two games, they could have got something out of both the Man United game and the Arsenal game. And then the Champions League dream would still be alive, wouldn't it? It's not dead, but...
Yeah, but these are difficult games.
Yeah,
you know, they're not games that you're expected to win. They're difficult games. I thought Arsenal done to Liverpool what Liverpool done to so many teams last year is close them down really quickly and caught them in the final third. So you've got to take your hats off to that. But yeah, as Gary says, you know, there was chances there for Liverpool, and another day it could have went for them. But against two of their main rivals for the Champions League spot, it just didn't happen for them.
And Everton all but guaranteed their premiership. So, I mean, we shouldn't be talking about this at this point.
No.
This Everton survive. It's like going back 15 years.
Well, it is. It's been a poor season, you know, by the standards they set. We talked about expectations from last year, but the three results, you know, been massive results. You know, if I'm honest, and he asked me 3-4 weeks ago, I wouldn't have known where the next win was coming from. You know, they were that poor. Had a little bit of luck, and 3-0 against Newcastle. They deserved that. Lucky at QPR to win the game, but they got the result. And against Southampton, which was always going to be a difficult game, but it wasn't a great performance by any means, but they got the early goal. And the one thing they have done over the last 3 weeks, they've defended better as a team, and they saw out the game against Southampton. It wasn't a great game, wasn't a great spectacle, but they got the early goal from Jagielka and defended when they had to do.
And the pleasing thing is that Tim Howard was the one who saved it. He's had a lot of flack this season, which I think a lot of it's been unfair because he's been terrific.
Yeah, I think it's been unjust, a lot of criticism. Listen, everybody's going to get criticised, especially a goalkeeper, but I thought the 2 saves he made were world-class saves. And, you know, we probably look at them, they went in, it would have been a different result simply because the pressure from the crowd that's building, you know, they're desperate to see results, desperate to move away from that relegation zone. So it would have been difficult if one of those had went in, and Tim deserves a lot of credit. You know, he's been a scapegoat for many supporters this season, but I thought those two saves were world class.
Southampton failed a bit, but they should still make the Europa, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think the problem is scoring goals, and the big boy Pella played up front for them again. It's been struggling to score goals this season, but he's a handful. He's a beast. Yeah, I think they'll get the European spots. I think they deserve to. I think, you know, he's done a really good job there, Ronald Koeman. Everybody's favourites for relegation at the beginning of the season because of the players he'd sold. But I think he's done really, really well, and I think they deserve it for me.
If they can keep Koeman, I suspect he may be on the list of several European clubs. Whether he'll stay or not, I don't know. Laudrup did he?
No, exactly. That's a chance, you know, that they'll have to face. But certainly, he's done a great job.
He's done brilliant.
He's done a great job.
I mean, when you think of the players that he lost, and everybody before the start of the season, like Ronald Koeman is coming in that side, and they're thinking, what has he come in for? You know, I mean, like he's in for a real rude awakening.
We were saying last week, I thought they'd go down, to be honest.
And the pick, you know, transfer-wise, they've done well in the transfer market. I think Schneiderlin and Wanyama are big players for them, the two holding midfield players. But they've certainly done exceptionally well this season.
OK, that's the end of part 2. We'll be back shortly to look at the weekend fixtures for both Liverpool and Everton. And we'll also touch on Tranmere and Wigan Athletic.
Free lawnmower removal with every grass laid because you'll never have to mow again. Football Friday brought to you by Elite Lawns. No mud, no mowing, no mess.
Hi and welcome back to Football Friday here at Bay TV. Weekend fixtures, chaps. Mr. Sharp, you're heading to Swansea for an early kick-off.
Yeah, it'll be a difficult one. Swansea's done really well. Another manager who's done really well this year. Gary Monk, been down there. Recent games have been beaten comprehensively. I think we got beaten in the League Cup comprehensively.
Yeah, that was a terrible
performance. Yeah, it was.
Wasn't it?
So, you know, it's got to be better tomorrow. But in saying that, going into the game in the back of 3 consecutive wins in the Premier League, confidence will be up. But as I said in the last part, defensively we've been better. We need to be at our best defensively tomorrow. Interesting to see who's going to be fit. You know, Lukaku I think is out again. Coney played last week and he wasn't really at the.
Is that just a case of him not being fit? He's been out for
I think
so long.
I think he's not match fit. Don't get me wrong, they train, but I think because it's been such a serious injury, you know, he has to do his own little routine and everything else, and he hasn't really got the sharpness at the moment. But again, you know, it'll be interesting to see what he picks. You know, they won last week. It wasn't a great performance. Naismith came on as a substitute and kind of gave us a little bit more urgency. So whether he plays from the start, you know, we'll just have to wait and see. But it's not an easy place to go, Swansea. But hopefully they go there full of confidence and can get a result.
I mean, you'll know, you two. Is it difficult now that, I mean, they are safe? Another point will make it definite, I think. Is it difficult for them to self-motivate now that they've got nothing to play for, really, apart from league placings? It'd be great to finish, you know, if they could finish with a flourish and finish in the top 10.
Yeah, because it's money, as we talk about. You know, I just think that Everton have been, it's been a really disappointing season. Everybody knows that. And the manager's come out and says a lot of them are playing for the future. Whether that's the case, we have to wait and see. But I think Everton have got to deliver, you know, and I think they've got to deliver for the fans. You know, that, you know, they've been really let down. So I don't think it's a case of flip-flops on and just seeing out into the summer like some teams are.
Yeah, I think if you play for Everton or Liverpool Football Club, there is no off days. You just can't, you know, you just can't go, I'm on it today and then take it off. Like that just doesn't work. I mean, you're under so much scrutiny, the pressure's so much on you. And as Sharpie rightly says, it's for the fans. Well, the fans will soon let you know if you're not doing it. I was going to
say, I mean, it is more for the fans because the support for both clubs, particularly away from home, is still astonishing. I mean, Everton was sold out last week against Southampton for a game that meant very little. Liverpool always take their full allocation. Everton will fill the away end at Swansea tomorrow, and they owe it to the. You know, it's not a nice journey to Swansea there and back, is it?
No, it's not. But as Gary says, you can't say, I'm going to coast this one, because they won't allow you to do that. And I think, you know, they travel in their horde, both sets of fans, and, you know, you've got to deliver for them. You can't go and coast, because they'll let you know, and they'll know if you're coasting. So I think they'll go down there tomorrow, and they need to finish the season. If they can finish the season strongly, you know, that puts them in good stead, hopefully, for the following season. They want to finish the season on the high, and with that, hopefully they can get a result tomorrow.
Do you think they do have players who are playing for the future there? Bearing in mind,
it's a really difficult one, you know. And I think you look at this. I think in the squad, I think the manager has spoken this week and said that, you know, he has to make, you know, 1 or 2 signings in the summer. I think he's got a really busy summer ahead. You know, I think there's you know, you look at Alcaraz and Coney, people he's brought in from Wigan. Haven't really delivered. McGeady hasn't really delivered. He's been out injured at the moment. You've got Aaron Lennon, who's on loan. Does he make that a permanent? So there's still quite a lot of decisions to be made.
I think what interests me, I was reading the paper as well this morning, and he was talking about he's looking for a number 10 for next season. Now I thought, you know, Barkley was like stitched on for
unless Barkley's going,
for that number 10 position. So it shows you that the mindset of the man. Well, it is in the paper right now, but it just shows you the mindset of the manager that he possibly doesn't think that Barkley is the man to deliver in that number 10 position. Albeit he sees him somewhere else, because he is a talented young individual player, isn't he?
I mean, from your perspective as a former Liverpool player, you must have been surprised at Everton's poor season.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I think everybody thought that they would finish where they usually finish, which is 5th or 6th or maybe 4th, if they could do that. But they're way off the pace this season. I
think Graeme made a great point as well, that, you know, I'm talking about Liverpool scoring their goals last season. I think Everton, from what I'm looking from the outside in, I always thought Everton's back 5 were like the solidity that they had, and the reason for their success was that, you know, they were difficult to beat. You know, Distin and Jagielka and Howard behind them. You know, that was your little 3 triangle there that were really, really solid more often than not. And then you had obviously your fullbacks that were really good going forward, but defensively as well. So I just think that may be the case, that it's been a little bit stop-start for them there at the back. They don't really know their best formation. They don't probably know their best individuals to put into these sort of places. Baines has been out for a wee while, injured as well. So, you know, all that kind of disrupts the team, and I think that's where they've been strong in the past, and that's maybe where they've not been so strong this season, and that's maybe...
I mean, the main criticism of Martinez has been his lack of flexibility. He wants to play a certain way, which is playing it out from the back, and clearly that's not worked in many games this season. And you begin to wonder whether he has to change. He has to modify, or he has to change personnel to buy players who will fit with the system he wants to play.
Well, I think you certainly have to have the players to fit the system. I don't think you can just all of a sudden mould a system around the players that you've got if they can't play that sort of system. I think the modern day game is very much about possession, and it's very much about starting the game from the back. But as I say, at times teams, I think, put too much pressure on themselves because they don't get the ball into the opposition's half fast enough or quickly enough and play from there. I think too many times that you see centre-backs in possession of the ball where they're not comfortable in general. That might change in a generation or two generations' time because of the way we're playing at this moment in time. But certainly at this stage, there's a lot of teams that play a lot of football from the back with players that are not capable and not comfortable in doing that. And it looks a little bit messy and it looks a little bit untidy. And you have maybe 15, 20 passes and you don't even get out your own half and they end up going back to the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper ends up launching it and you've lost possession anyway. So, you know.
Gary mentioned Ross Barkley there. I mean, what does Martinez do with this kid? Because he's clearly incredibly talented and yet he's had a very average season.
Yeah, he's only, as you say, a kid, and he's had an average season. Everybody singing his praises last year, and it as so often happens, not only as a team is it second season syndrome, but it's also as a player. You know, players in the opposition know how to play against you. You know, Ross is, for me, he's short of confidence. This season's been up and down for him. He hasn't played probably as many games as he wanted to. He's came out in the paper recently saying that he wants to play in that number 10 position. That's his favoured position. But it hasn't been... He's still got a lot to learn from me. He's still got an awful lot to learn. He's a young lad, but I've talked about it time and time again. He needs that experience. You know, when you look at Leon Osmond, who's a different player to him, but maybe plays in the same position, Leon Osmond's got the experience and the know-how to get into little pockets of space, whereas Ross at this moment in time struggles to get himself into space where he's going to hurt the opposition. So he's got an awful lot to learn, but again, hopefully we talk about the under-21s. Is he going to be with the under-21s? It's a really... I think the kid needs to play and learn more. You know,
where does he... That's a good point, though. Like, where does he play? You know, if you don't play in the first team, where do you play? Do you go back into the under-21 system, where it's mainly 18, 19-year-olds that are playing there? You're not really getting the experience as such. So where do these young kids that come into the first team and maybe looking for a bit of experience, but not regulars, where do they actually play? They don't play enough football for me. They don't get that experience by playing football.
I was talking to a friend of mine, an Evertonian, the other day, who said that Ross Barkley is going to be the new Jack Rodwell. Talked about, lauded, going to be the next big thing, and it all fizzles out. Well,
the only thing I would say about Jack Rodwell is I think, looking back, and I think Jack made the wrong decision. You know, of course, money-wise, you know, he went to Man City, a big money move. He's now on at Sunderland. But I think he would have been better staying at Everton. He had more chance of playing in Everton's first team than he did at Manchester City.
True.
You know, and I think Ross, and people are talking about whether he'll be there next year or the year after, you've got to be very careful, you know, for a kid. You know, why would you go to Manchester City knowing that you're not going to get in ahead of Silva and people like that kind of thing? You've got to be very careful your next career move. For me, at the moment, Ross Barkley needs to stay at Everton, and as Gary said as well, learn the game. He's still got an awful lot to learn in the game, and his best place for it to me is at Everton under Martinez. And who knows, next year he might hit the ground running and then be a regular.
Liverpool play Newcastle at Anfield on Monday night. Home banker?
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you?
Is there such a thing as a home banker? This is it.
Premier League is that you never can tell. I mean, Newcastle are struggling at this moment in time. They look as if they're void of ideas. New managers come in on a temporary basis.
They have got the flip-flops on.
I just, you know, I'm not 100% sure that they're all actually pulling in the same direction up there. They never seem to be. some of the great games Liverpool have had in the past with Newcastle, you know, go back to the 2-4-3s, absolutely fantastic. I would imagine there'll be goals in the game. I think it'll be exciting. It'll just be interesting to see how Liverpool, after the 2 defeats, the cup tie, how they go into this game, whether it's one eye on the semi-final, because I think everybody, you know, I think we're all kind of saying Champions League football is gone now. I think it'd take a massive effort and a massive slip up from the teams above us for us to get into the Champions League position.
But, you know, by the time they play on Monday, United will have played.
Well, that's
City,
true,
they could have lost.
So they might
United have still got to go to Goodison, which is always
better
uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. They might have, yeah, you're right, Ian.
They have to keep going, Liverpool, don't they?
They absolutely have to.
It could change at the very last minute, and they could miss out by a point and regret fielding.
They have to
weakened
be in a
team.
position where if anybody slips up, they can take advantage of that. I would think that against Newcastle, you would like, well, I think we'd all like to think that we'd get a result pretty easily, to be honest with you. But
they're a mess, Newcastle, aren't they? In all aspects of a football club. They
were at Goodison a few weeks ago, and they were awful. They were awful. They had a few injuries, but they were awful. Liverpool, I think, will win quite comfortably. They've had a lot of injuries. I know that they've had an upheaval. The managers left and everything. And Pardew's went to Palace and doing a really good job there. The boy John Carver's came in and he struggled a little bit. The results haven't been good enough.
It'd be interesting to see, because like they're a football club that actually make money. You know, and how many?
One of the few.
Yeah,
one of the
how
few.
many can say that?
Okay, we'll be back shortly when we'll be discussing the old duels between these two players who faced each other on countless occasions back in the 80s, the glorious 80s.
Free lawnmower removal with every grass laid, because you'll never have to mow again. Elite Lawns Artificial Grass, landscape partners with Tiger Turf.
Hi and welcome back to the final part of Football Friday. Just a reminder, if you do want to contact us here, we're more than willing to listen to your views or your criticisms. Best way is through email. The email address is footballfriday@baytvliverpool.com. footballfriday@baytvliverpool.com. Feel free to write in. Okay, final part, chaps. Just like to mention briefly Wigan Athletic, a classic example of how not to run a football club. Discuss, Mr. Sharp.
Well, I think that over the years they've been run very, very well with Dave Whelan, and obviously Martinez was the manager, won the FA Cup. So I think you look at it and think they've probably punched above their weight in the Premier League and
massively,
and done really, really well for the crowds they get and everything else. But the appointment of Malcolm Mackay hasn't worked. They find themselves in perilous position. You know, they could go down this year again. They've appointed an ex-player, Gary Caldwell. Is it the answer? You've got a 23-year-old now running a football club, which is extraordinary to say the least. But he's made a big decision in getting rid of Malcolm Mackay. Only time will tell whether it's the right decision, but certainly they're in a mess now. Absolute mess.
Dave Whelan must be absolutely in a state. I mean, I know how much he loves that club and what they'd achieved against all the odds in a rugby league town. And I've just got this horrible feeling that Wigan might go straight through the divisions here.
Quite easily, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, well, there's history suggests that could be the case, isn't it? I mean, when you think about
happened before, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. When was it they won the FA Cup? It was only a couple of seasons back, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it just shows you how quickly it can actually happen. Liverpool have actually got a couple of kids out on loan there, Shea Ojo and young Jerome Sinclair. I don't exactly know how well they're doing, but it's a difficult place for young kids to go if you're a team that's struggling in the Championship. And they're playing in a team that's struggling. It's difficult to express yourself, especially the way that they are as well, the kind of players that they are.
They haven't won a home game since December, is it?
Well, you look at the point of Malcolm Mackay, and I think everybody was saying, yeah, a good appointment. This is a good appointment for Wigan, and it hasn't worked out.
No, it hasn't.
And you look at the highlights, and they're conceding goals. You know, the pitch isn't the best, so whether that's harming them as well.
I think the appointment of Malcolm Mackay was, from a football term, it was probably a good idea, but the timing of it, with what happened at Cardiff and things like that, and it was possibly the wrong decision at the wrong time. Football-wise, he's done exceptionally well as a manager in his managerial career. But I just think that maybe looking back, he could have made a better appointment, Dave Whelan.
And as you say, Graeme, the guy in charge now is David Sharp, David Whelan's grandson. And he's 23 years old and he's running what is, a major predominant football club. Yes. Is that too young?
Well, obviously Dave Whelan's seen something in him to say that he can do it, but 23 to run a football club, for me, that's far too young. You know, no experience in it. Obviously, he'll be getting help, don't get me wrong, but...
I was finding it hard enough to play at 23.
Yeah, exactly.
Never mind run the football club.
Exactly. So you'll have other people in there helping him, but it was a strange appointment, a really strange appointment. And they've gone for the safe option as well. An ex-player, you know, give them the job. If you keep them up, fantastic. If they don't...
Well, he gives him the job and then says it'll be a miracle if he saves us. So,
and it's a long-term appointment. So I think they're already planning for going down.
I think so,
I mean, the problem is that even when they were at their peak, when they were winning the FA Cup and riding high in the Premier League, they still couldn't couldn't half fill the stadium. I mean, God only knows what they're going to get if they
but
get
listen,
if they
from
go down.
where they've come from, I remember when I first came down here and they were in the old 4th division. So where they've come from, they've done really, really well. And all credit to the managers and Dave Whelan, you know, to get them there. But as everybody knows, it's always hard to stay there. And once you start slipping down, as we talked about it before, you can go all the way down and go back to where they once were.
Which brings us to Tranmere Rovers, who sadly are still marooned in a bottom 2 place in Division 2. They've got, I think, 5 games left, of which 3 are away from home, starting this weekend at Southend. Phil Brown's got them pushing for promotion.
Tough game.
And
they're all tough games at this stage of the season. Ian, we talked about Tranmere over the season, and just when you think that they're on the up, you know, they concede more goals and then they're getting beaten games. You know, it doesn't look well for them at all. Hartlepool have been in a little run now. Okay, they got beat the other day, but they've been in a little run. It's kind of taken them out the bottom relegation places. So Tranmere are facing a really
in their last 10 league games, they've picked up 2 points out of 30.
I think they've won 1 out of the last 11.
Yeah, I mean, they had the bounce when Mickey Adams arrived.
I think Sharpie made a good point there. Like, you look at Hartlepool, and when you're down in that position where you're fighting for your life, you're looking at the sides, and there's always one side that maybe have a little bit of run of form. Tranmere don't look to be like that side at this moment in time. It's gone the other way, isn't it? They're struggling to find anything. I mean, let's keep our fingers crossed that they can pull something out, but it'll be a shame.
I mean, they struggle for Gates, obviously living in the shadow of Everton and Liverpool. But I mean, if they drop out of the Football League, then you really do fear, not just for how they're going to go, but for their entire future.
Well, of course, and you go down and you talk about it, and there's clubs down. Hereford United were a club that were in the league, and they're out of existence now. They went bust. Stockport County went down to 6th level now, so it happens, and you're not too good to go on that path. And Tranmere have got to be very careful. If they do go down, it's how they react. Do they react in terms of they want to go straight back up? And to do that, you have to pay more money to get better players in. So it's an interesting.
Because as we've touched on before, at the moment they don't pay enough to get even half decent players, do they?
Well, sorry, Graeme. I think at that level, budgets are vitally important. I think if you look at Tranmere's budget, I wouldn't imagine it would be very high compared to a lot of teams in that division. And that means a lot, I think,
definitely. And they've got the young kid from Everton, George Green, who's done really well for them. Scored the other day. He could miss Southend game because I think he's got an illness and there's a bug in the camp. So that doesn't help. So it's for me, it's looking grim for Tranmere.
It's not looking good.
No,
it's not looking good. So let's go back. Let's go back to yesteryear. You two were adversaries back in the 80s. What was Mr. Sharp like to play against?
He was a
handful.
Yeah, he was a handful, actually. I mean, when you look at players these days, like Lukaku, for instance, 6 feet, what is he, 6'4", 6'5" or something like that, a monster of a man.
Unit of a man.
You know, I mean, you look at Sharpie. Now, I'll guarantee you, any centre-back playing now or then would have as much problems with Sharpie as they would have with Lukaku. He was just brilliant at like backing into you. And
he was, and we've had this discussion 1,000 times. He was the master of jumping slightly early and appearing to be pushed by the centre back.
I don't know how
he admits it.
I always used to get him. I mean, I think they used to bang it up to the back to Sharpie, get a free kick. Kevin Sheedy would come up, put it in the top corner, game over, and that was it. I know there was a little bit more to it than that.
Slightly more to it than that. And what was he like to play against?
Tough, you know. You could see Gary, Alan Hansen, Matt Lawrenson, all very, very good defenders. Great on. Gaz was great on the ball.
Good footballers.
Good footballers, good on the ball, coming out and making things happen. Could easily have played in this series without a shadow of a doubt. But we like playing Liverpool because we played that way, and we thought rough them up and get the ball up early and make it a battle. And that could put Liverpool, don't get me wrong, Liverpool could battle with the best of them. You know, they had players to do that. But we always felt that we had a chance if we got the ball in there and rough them up, as you said. But if we allowed them to play, they'd outplay us all day long. You know, they're probably better players on the ball, more comfortable on the ball, but we knew if we could get after them a little bit. But again, the good thing about it is we all live in the same vicinity, and so we saw everybody outside as well. So even though we battled against each other, we all good friends kind of thing. It was great era to play in. But certainly they were a great team.
Were you in the team when he scored the goal which he's dined out on for the last 30 years?
That was Mark Lawson.
He would have caught me.
Mark Lawson played that game. I remember that game. I was at that game. Like fantastic goal. But I think the beauty about the 80s playing at Liverpool or Everton was just the fact that it was a time in Merseyside, wasn't it? The two teams dominated the football at that time. And that was the beauty about it. You know, it was a great experience.
Who was the toughest striker you ever played against? Who gave you the most problems?
It was difficult. I mean, there's so many in different ways. I mean, as I say, Sharpie was always a handful because you always knew you were going to have a confrontation, like get free kicks against you, and he would drive you like mad that way. Hughes was like a handful because his physicality. He was strong. And a guy, Billy Whitehurst, I don't know if a guy, people out there probably won't know too much about Billy Whitehurst, but Billy Whitehurst was just like an animal, to be honest with you. Yeah. But unfortunately for like Billy, he wasn't the best technically.
He made up for it in other areas.
That's put it politely. Like, I don't think he'd quite get on with like the modern day game.
And who was the best centre back you played against? Who marked you out of the game? There's too many to mention. Actually,
no, there is too many. They were all decent, but the one person I always found great difficulty playing against was David O'Leary at Arsenal. Whether at Highbury was really tight and close pitch, and never seemed to get away. A little bit like Gary, long legs. He just thought you were away, and he'd get a tackle in. He's decent in there. He was probably the hardest in terms of hardest. I never got a lot of change out of him. But we talk about Billy Whitehurst. They had two at Oxford at times, Briggs and Shotton. Oh my goodness! And talk about my goodness.
Those were the good old days, weren't they? When a tackle was a tackle.
Yeah, definitely. And these two, let me tell you, could tackle. And it wasn't always the ball they were after, but they made a tackle. But it was good.
Good days, though. As
great
you say,
days.
they were great days.
They were competitive. You know,
that's
you wanted
what we
to
want.
win.
We want both clubs back.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you very much for watching Football Friday here on Bay TV again. Thanks to my two guests, Graeme and Gary. They'll be back next week, as will I. Have a very good weekend. Thank you.
Safe for the family, including the dog. Football Friday, brought to you by Elite Lawns.